Before I start, the reason I put this together related to the photographing waterfalls is it's a prime time in the year because the water is running well now, and it just is such a beautiful thing to see waterfalls. And when I first started to photograph waterfalls, I learned a couple techniques, which I will talk about, related to shutter speed and depth of field and ISO. But I also was so taken by the beauty of the waterfall that I didn't get the perspective of having other aspects in the image or too many other aspects within the image. And that's why I thought I would put this together for everyone today to show you what I see as really outstanding photographic images of
which one did your husband go to? Clifford Price.
Waterfall.
You just booked him in?
Yeah, I just booked another man behind you though.
Oh, sorry.
What's the last name?
Price.
So I will start with what I'm calling ho-hum, because that's how I put the flyer out there. And here's an image of a waterfall. Not only ho-hum, but there are so many aspects that are just not good in this image. Whoever, I don't know whose this was, I got it off the web. The exposure certainly is completely wrong for this, in the sense that the shadow areas pretty much are blocked up, but more importantly, the highlight areas, especially at the bottom of the waterfall, are blown out. And nothing else is sharp within the image, which means to me that once they were changing the shutter speed to be long enough to have the water smooth, they were hand holding. And when you are photographing waterfalls and you want smooth water, you need to be on a tripod in order to keep everything else sharp. So as I've taught in the past related to where does your eye go, certainly it goes to the bottom of the waterfall, which is the brightest, and then my eye goes up to the right-hand side, so it takes away from the waterfall. And if you look at the total amount of the space of this image that is represented by the waterfall, it's maybe 20% or 25%. So this just is not going to do it. When you're photographing waterfalls, you want the water to be smooth. And so if you start off at, say, an f16, so that you get the foreground in focus and the background in focus, at least an f16, and set your ISO initially at 200. And the reason you want it down low is because you want the shutter speed to be long enough to make the water smooth. And in most cases, of course, that will depend on how fast the water is really flowing. So I'm just going to give you some thoughts in relation to start at 1/20th of a second, take a shot, and look at your histogram to see that you're not overexposing or underexposing. Very important to look at that histogram. Then look at the image to see if the water's smooth. If it's not smooth, you need it to be a longer exposure. So what do you do then, suppose you have the histogram and it's looking correct? Well, then in that case, you need to lower the ISO, which will require more exposure, and more exposure will come from making the shutter speed longer. In some cases, I've even had to get the shutter speed down to a half of a second or 1 second to get the water the way I wanted it. So this is not an interesting image, and the reasons I discussed: aperture, shutter speed, on a tripod, those kinds of things. This image, which I'm sure the photographer was saying, so overwhelmed by the beauty of this scenery, well, then it's not a Photoshop, it's not a photograph of the waterfall. In fact, here's another of that aspect, that the waterfall probably is only 10% of this image. And it's somewhat interesting, but my eye goes away from the waterfall after I've seen where it is and what it is. And I roam around to the other part of the image because most of the other image is just a scene. And the sky is so bright, my eye goes up to the sky. And then there's a portion of the waterfall up in the upper area that's blown out. No detail in that water. So you need to look at that histogram all the time when you're shooting. Ho-hum, to me, ho-hum. Again, the waterfall is a very beautiful waterfall, but it's not the major portion of this image. You're not showing me really the waterfall. And the foreground has a place to stand, which is something I always talk about, but it's brighter than the rest of the image. And you have a lot of other aspects related to this image. I'll quickly do some changes just to show you the idea of what I'm talking about related to getting your ideas across on what you want the viewer to see. Now, the stack of rocks is interesting. Does that really show the waterfall? No, but that's okay. I'll leave it in this one. But I wanted to show you, if we crop in, now you're showing me the waterfall and too much in the foreground. So I'll crop a little bit more off the bottom of the image, not leave enough for you to stand. And that's so bright that afterwards, just come in and darken that, good, dodge or burn on midtones to darken that, and look how your eye now is going to the waterfall. And the same with on the left side and around the upper top and the right-hand side, and now that waterfall is really standing out a lot. So once you've captured the image, or while you're shooting it, think about what you're putting into the image. In particular for waterfalls, that is so important. Here's that shot I told you I would show you where the shutter speed isn't quite slow enough. You see the detail here in the right-hand side. The water almost smooth, but it isn't. And one of the aspects that everybody knows me by now to know that I say, we read from left to right, so the eye comes in the image. Now, flip this around so that you're reading this the other way. Now you are coming in from the left and your eye is going up through the water. I'll come back to the other way. Your eye comes into this upper left area, and then you come right off the right-hand side. So you flow with the water and out. If you flip it that way, then the viewer is coming in and seeing it. The other aspect of this image is, and it's a bugaboo with me about waterfalls, is that they shouldn't be blue. That's for me. I'm not saying for you or for anyone else, but they shouldn't be blue. And one of the ways I can do this one very easily is to take it into Adobe Camera Raw, because there's blue throughout the whole image. When I need to have it for just a specific area, I'll show you how I do that. But in this case, to take it into this, and in the Color Mixer tab, click on Saturation, click on the Targeted Adjustment tool in the upper right, bring it in, click on the water, and move it to the left. So you notice that it's taking all the color out that's related to blue or purple. Now, that presents even that image, although I don't think it's a great waterfall image, but look at the difference of the blue to the white. Now we're getting closer and closer to a good image of the waterfall. Here again, the left to right for me, now it's the lead in from the bottom left coming right up through the falls. And now even seeing this, the right-hand side has a lot there that doesn't need to be there to emphasize the water. And on the left a little bit. So just cropping more makes a big difference in this image. Let's look at it this way. Coming in from the left, your eye and mind jumps over that area on the left into the water, and then the water brings you down and out to the lower left corner, the lower right corner. Flipping that, you come in from the left, you see that. Now you have that empty space over on the right with not that much interest in that area. So cropping that brings your eye in right into the waterfall. Look at the difference of from there to there. And then again, the blue is a bothersome to me. And I won't do this every time to just show you the blue, but I will do it a number of times when we get into some of the other images. But on this one, I'll do it, saturation, target adjustment tool, and I'll make the water white. Now, that really shows out very well.
Today?
I'm not sure that I like the the format of the waterfall with the one part going up to the right, the other part going up to the left, and that kind of thing. So maybe when you're shooting, think about if you can maneuver around to get a different perspective and think about how that waterfall is flowing. Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Oh, okay.
You're on the phone. How about a shot where astral photography, beautiful. This is really a beautiful shot, but it's not a waterfall shot. I am sort of bringing that in that way. And probably the person wasn't really thinking that this is a waterfall shot as much, but in fact, the composition is very strong with the waterfall right where the Milky Way is located. And some things could be done on this one to trim it and so on. So for me, a ho-hum shot related to the waterfall, but it certainly is a very pretty image, but not as a waterfall. So go to the next category that I called okay. You know what I'm going to do with this one because it's flowing from the left out the right-hand side. Just flip that horizontally. Now your eye comes right in, and the waterfall itself is really at the power point related to the rule of thirds on this. So I think this is a good image. It's an okay image in the sense that the leaves and they're very pretty color up here, but it takes your eye away from the water itself. And there are other aspects in here down in the lower right. I'll just darken a little bit of this to show you again the control of putting the viewer into where you want the viewer to go instantly in relation to your images. So if I darken these areas just a little bit, but keeping detail, so we look at the difference from here, and your eye roams around, to here, your eye coming right into the water. I'm not sure that for me that this, shouldn't say I'm not sure, I'm sure that the color in the water on this one is not that appealing to me. And so very easy to go into Adobe Camera Raw and play with it a little bit and see how it works. Does it work better to have it be pure white or not pure white? Just to take some of that color out, just leave some color in because of the color of the leaves and so on. But I still think there's too much on the right-hand side. So it's an okay shot, but not one, as you'll see when we get to what I'm calling wow shots. So now I've made the waterfall by cropping much more a portion of the image itself. Again, you get so taken by images of the waterfall when you're standing there and you're photographing it, you get so taken by it that, and once you capture it, think, yeah, I've captured, that's it. And one of the other techniques I will use on this one is I came up with the idea of a scrunch and a stretch, and a friend of mine now is calling it the Mariana scrunch. So I'm going to do a Mariana scrunch here. I did a selection, and I'll do a free transform and bring this up. So that I don't want to crop off any of that area. I want to keep it. So being able to just scrunch a portion of it gives a whole different perspective of that image. So I'll do that, crop it so you can see the difference, and crop off a little bit of the top so that the waterfall is more dominant. And now darkening the leaves.
Do I want the earmuffs?
So let's look at how the image was up front.
Yes, since I was dusting the shelf.
James Powers, mute yourself, James Powers.
Here's one that I'm saying, okay. For a number of reasons that I'll explain. What a beautiful waterfall. And you see the amount of space that the waterfall represents within the image. And this tree laying down in the water is a good foreground. It gives you a foreground, middle ground, background. But you have a sky, which is very bright. And overall, the image is sort of the same light, very good light. It's a soft light. Just do a little bit more of those things I talked about. How about just darkening with midtones around the side and the foreground a little bit more here and in the lower right, and you'll see how much more you now are going to the waterfall. However, you have so much on the left that's taking away, and I don't want to crop because I would lose some of that detail. So I'll do the scrunch. And bring that in. Now I'm concentrating more on the waterfall. I want you to keep seeing the aspects of knowing that the viewer will instantly see what you want them to see. Not that you were standing there and saw that wonderfully beautiful waterfall, but you want the viewer to instantly see that wonderfully beautiful waterfall. So look at the difference of cropping in and how much difference all that open space makes versus that. And if we come up to the sky area and let's just darken it without, I could go into Adobe Camera Raw and do more sophisticated things there, but let's just darken a little bit to show you how much difference that makes of having that darker area to push you down into the water, into the waterfall. So what a difference that presentation now. And I think as I see this even more, the foreground has too much area in it. So we'll do another Mariana scrunch and just move that up a little bit more. And now the waterfall becomes a major component of what you want the viewer to see. So that when that image hits the screen, especially if you're submitting it to a competition, you want the judges to instantly see that and see the beauty of it. So this is an okay image from the beginning. You'll see as we build up from okay to good, but, and to some of the others, and then the wow. Beautiful scene, very famous scene. The waterfall, and this probably was not really considered as being a waterfall image, but I thought I'd show it because of that part of it and the structure in the background. And this little bit of waterfall over here on the left is not as important to me if I'm thinking of this truly as a waterfall image. So I'll crop in a little bit there, crop in a little here, crop down from the top so that I will emphasize even more the building and the waterfall. Another technique I use often is when you have such beautiful color of the trees, I'll use the sponge tool on saturate at about 30, 35%, there's 31%. And I'll bring out some of the color in the yellows and in the background area. Now, I want to bring your eye to the waterfall more. So if I darken a little bit in the lower left and in the lower right and up the right-hand side and now in the back to emphasize the waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
You see the difference see how much more your eye roams around? Again, this may not have been thought of as a waterfall, but watch the difference of the cropping and then the additional dodge, burn, and other areas, how that really now comes out from the screen. So you want impact, initial impact, and strong composition with any image, but very much so with waterfalls. So those are okay. Go to this one. You may not even consider this a waterfall, but it was listed as a waterfall image. And you know that I've shown this to you before, you know this is what I will do to this. So now your eye comes in from the left and you look at the waterfall. This way you look at the waterfall and move off to the right and look at those people down there in that area. But this now forces you to see the waterfall. And the darker area above it, I think, needs to have some detail. Again, look at your histogram. Adjust your histogram to give you the detail in the shadows and the highlights. And if, I'm sorry, adjust your histogram, you adjust your settings so that you can get what you need to have with detail in some areas. And don't just get all excited about the fact that you've able to capture and photograph a waterfall. You want them to be a little bit more. Look at the percentage of this image that is represented by the waterfall. Now, I probably would have cropped in from the right on this image, but I don't want to lose the figures in there. But let me just show you the cropping related to the waterfall first. If we do that and crop in from the bottom and a little bit from the top, and that cloud up there in the upper left works really well. Now that really is a waterfall image. So that works much, much better. Do a little bit of sponge on the greens, just a little bit, and the yellows, and now bring your eye right in even more to that waterfall. And I would remove the blue from the water. But I'll come back to, somebody is saying, yes, 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 you need to mute yourself. Come back to before I cropped it. Now, there's another way that this image could be brought out and still keep those figures in there. And one is I'll crop from the top, but I will scrunch. So I'll use a Mariana scrunch from the bottom and keep all the details. Oh, missed it. So that we'll provide even more emphasis to the waterfall and leading lines. Leading lines are so important in any image, but especially in waterfalls, so that you are bringing the viewer's eye exactly where you want them to go instantly when the image hits the screen. So I will do that and do the upper portion just a little bit and scrunch that also so that I can keep it as a rectangular image. You see, I may need to go down and do a little bit more on the bottom, but you see, whoop, what happened to my image here?
Oh.
Okay, I'm getting back there, folks. Get there. Okay, we're back in Photoshop, yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, good. So I'll crop down from the top. And so now I've been able to keep the people in the image and have the waterfall be an aspect of it also, but it's still a very small portion of the image to be a waterfall. So those were okay. The last one in the okay group is this. What a beautiful waterfall. Really. Where's your eye going immediately? Up to the upper right-hand corner. So a good point to make here is when you are shooting in bright sunlight, do not have the sunlight on the water. Your eye looks at it and it's beautiful with the sunlight on it. Shoot in open shade, because then you can get nice flowing water and no blowouts, no loss of detail in the highlight areas. Here's this image to me, and instantly I see it, and we'll come back and address that upper part of the white light area, but I'll just crop in on the waterfall itself, and this rock in the foreground here, bring you into the waterfalls even more. So bring this up. Now the waterfall dominates, and I'll darken that bright area in the upper top so that your eye comes down into the waterfall. And even though there's some water coming down from this upper right area, I would use the spot healing brush and remove some of those because they're too bright and the eye will go there. You want the eye to go instantly to the waterfall. So I just change some of that stuff in that area. Now that area, even at the top now, is appearing to be a little too bright, so darken that. And I'll open up by dodging some of the foreground on midtones to just bring out a place for you to stand and emphasize this one rock there, and even bring a little bit more light to the waterfall itself so that instantly, when I come back from here, now how instantly you look right at the water. Much more interesting as a waterfall image. Just do a little bit more with the greens around some areas. So these were okay. You say, wow, geez, that was a very pretty waterfall, John. Well, what are you talking about? Well, let me show you some of the images now that are at a different level. And these are good, but, and here you go. Person saw that waterfall, they saw the light up in the top part, but look at the lens flare aspects in the upper part of the image. The water is not smooth. All this bright area, you can't help but be looking up here and not even paying any attention to this waterfall. One of the ways that I've taught a number of times to see where the eye is going, because I talk about it a lot, is rotate the image around. Let me rotate this around till it's up, either sideways or upside down, so that you're not looking at the subject, you're looking at brights and darks. And now you can see your eye is going right to the bottom part. So yeah, good composition, but no, doesn't make it. Same with this one, very close. And what a beautiful waterfall coming through that opening in the rocks. And if nothing more than darkening the upper part, let's try that. And I don't want to take the rays away, but just to lessen some of that so that the water is the major element here. But even so, causes some issues. So one of the things to do rather than this one, rather than to crop it, I'll select the whole image and I simply will stretch it. Is I can stretch it and keep the rays, but remove that bright area in the upper top. And by stretching it, the waterfall becomes larger and looks much better than the way it was. Now I'll do a little bit more darkening up in that area, keep those rays, emphasize them a little bit more as rays. Now your eye is going more to that waterfall. And in this case, I would want some detail in the right side and left side. So I'll do dodging on midtones just to bring out a little bit more of the detail around in this area here. See, I didn't crop very well on this one, so I'll do that. Now, you look at the waterfall and the scene, very pretty scene. Open up just a little bit more down in the foreground, and you notice now how much more three-dimensionality we're getting. Let's
Say,
go.
John,
Yes.
could I suggest something? That down at the very bottom of the waterfall, it's so light and bright, almost doesn't look natural.
Yes.
But what if you would saturate the water a little bit to emphasize the bottom, to bring your eye down below the water line there?
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be interesting or not, but just.
You mean in this area here?
No, in the water itself.
Oh, in the water itself, down in this area.
Yeah.
Okay.
To kind of balance the top and the bottom, just an idea.
Yes, I understand. But before I do any saturation, let me just darken that area just a little bit. And then do saturate. Because saturation also lightens it a little bit. And you can play with different ways. But I think what a difference of how this looks now compared to opening. And that's why I said good, but it just, look at this. And then you had it there, just needed to bring it back to it being really interesting. Now that I see it again this way, I think, emphasize that even more. I could scrunch. Go back to that. And the idea is to emphasize, to bring the viewer, emphasize the waterfall, bring the viewer's eye in instantly into what you want the viewer to see, so that there isn't any doubt about what you are presenting. I keep saying those kinds of things, but I related that mostly to if you're submitting this to a competition. So when it hits the screen, instantly the judges see what you want them to see.